Emma's seemingly perfect life unravels when she discovers her husband Ryan's shocking affair with her best friend, Sophie, betrayed and blindsided. Emma's trust is shattered as she uncovers layers of lies, manipulation, and financial deceit. Fueled by anger and desperation, Ryan refuses to let go, escalating his actions into a dangerous obsession. With threats, break-ins, and legal battles, Emma faces a relentless fight for justice and safety. As tensions rise and dark secrets emerge, the story exposes the devastating consequences of infidelity and betrayal, leaving viewers outraged and questioning how far someone will go to maintain control. Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Before we dive into today's story, let me ask, what's the worst betrayal you've ever experienced? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Now get comfortable, because this one's going to leave you questioning who you can really trust. The house smelled like lavender and freshly brewed coffee, a scent Emma Harris had always found comforting. It used to make her feel safe, grounded. But tonight, it felt artificial, like a cover-up, masking something rotten beneath the surface. She leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the flickering light above the dining table. Her husband, Ryan, sat across from her, scrolling through his phone, as if the world outside didn't exist. Emma was 34, a kindergarten teacher with a heart too big for her own good, or so her friends always told her. She was the type to bake cookies for new neighbors and offer free tutoring to struggling kids. Her light brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, and despite her soft features, there was a sharpness in her hazel eyes tonight, a look that said she wasn't in the mood for small talk. Ryan, on the other hand, was the kind of guy who always knew how to work a room. At 36, he was tall, with dark hair that he styled just right. Never too formal, never too casual. He owned a successful marketing firm, and his confidence showed in the way he carried himself. But tonight, that confidence seemed hollow, almost rehearsed. Late night again? Emma finally broke the silence. Her voice was steady, but her grip on the coffee mug betrayed her. Ryan didn't even look up. Yeah, clients are demanding this week. You know how it is. She knew exactly how it was. The late nights, the sudden work trips, the unexplained credit card charges. It had all started 6 months ago, right after their anniversary. An anniversary Ryan had forgotten, by the way. But Emma didn't push, not yet. She wasn't the kind of woman to jump to conclusions. At least, that's what she told herself. The sound of heels clicking against hardwood floors interrupted her thoughts. Morning, lovebirds. Emma's best friend, Sophie, walked into the kitchen like she owned the place. She was everything Emma wasn't: bold, outspoken, and effortlessly glamorous. At 32, she ran her own interior design business and had the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted in life. Sophie, Emma said, forcing a smile. What brings you here this early? Brunch plans, remember? Or did Mr. Busy over here forget to tell you? Sophie smirked, her eyes lingering on Ryan a little too long. Emma's stomach twisted. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed Sophie's lingering glances, the way her laughter was just a bit too loud when Ryan was around. But she shook the thought away. This was Sophie, her best friend since college. She wouldn't, would she? Ryan finally looked up, flashing Sophie the kind of smile that used to make Emma's heart race. You know me, always working, but you ladies have fun. Don't worry, we will, Sophie said, her red lips curling into a smile that Emma couldn't quite place. The restaurant was crowded, the hum of conversations filling the space. Emma stirred her iced tea, her thoughts spinning as Sophie talked about some new project. You're quiet today, Sophie said, tilting her head. Everything okay? Emma hesitated. She wanted to believe it was all in her head, that she was being paranoid, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Yeah, just tired. Sophie reached across the table, squeezing Emma's hand. You work too hard. You need to let loose, Em. Take a vacation or something. Emma forced a smile. Maybe. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't relax until she had answers. Later that night, Emma stood outside Ryan's office door. He was on a call, his voice low and urgent. She pressed her ear to the wood, her heart pounding. I can't talk right now, he said. No, I told you. Emma doesn't know anything. Her blood ran cold. The next day, Emma found herself doing something she never thought she'd do. Going through Ryan's phone, she told herself it was just to ease her mind, that she was being ridiculous. But the moment she unlocked it, her stomach dropped. There it was. A message from Sophie. Can't stop thinking about last night. I wish you didn't have to leave so early. Emma's hands shook as she scrolled through the messages. Months of texts, pictures, and plans. Weekend getaways. Secret dinners. All right there in black and white. Her best friend. Her husband. Bile rose in her throat, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. But then something shifted. The panic faded, replaced by something colder, sharper. Emma wasn't the kind of woman to let things slide. Not anymore. The house was too quiet when Ryan came home that evening. He walked into the living room to find Emma sitting on the couch, his phone in her lap. "Emma," he started, but she held up a hand. "Don't," she said, her voice calm. Too calm. "Just don't." For the first time, Ryan looked nervous. "Good. I can explain what that you've been screwing my best friend?" She stood, tossing the phone onto the coffee table. "That you lied to my face for months? It's not what it looks like." She laughed. An ugly, hollow sound. "It's exactly what it looks like, Ryan. And you know what I'm done." Ryan took a step toward her, but she backed away. "No. You don't get to play the victim here. You cheated, both of you. And now, you're going to pay for it." The next morning, Ryan woke up to find Emma gone. So were all his clothes, his credit cards, and his laptop. On the kitchen counter, there was a note. "Check your bank accounts. Oh, and tell Sophie I said hi." Ryan stared at the note on the kitchen counter, his hands trembling as he read it again. The words were simple, calm, even, but they hit him like a freight train. Emma was gone, and by the looks of it, she'd taken more than just her dignity. He grabbed his phone and opened the banking app. His heart dropped. The accounts were empty, every single one of them. Checking, savings, even the investment accounts. They were all wiped clean. "Damn it," Ryan hissed, slamming his fist onto the counter. He tried calling Emma, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Emma, leave a message." Her voice was cheerful, a sharp contrast to the icy pit forming in his stomach. He didn't bother leaving a message. What could he even say? "Sorry for cheating. Please come back." Instead, he called Sophie. She picked up on the second ring. "Ryan?" "She knows." Silence. Then, "What?" "Emma. She knows everything." Meanwhile, Emma sat in her car, parked outside a motel on the other side of town. She hadn't planned this. Not really. But after finding those messages, she couldn't stay in that house. Not for another second. Her suitcase sat on the passenger seat, packed with just enough to get her through the next few days. She'd figure out the rest later. Her phone buzzed Ryan. Again, she ignored it. Then another call, this time from Sophie. Emma's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Can't stop thinking about last night." The words echoed in her mind, playing on a loop. She wanted to scream, cry, do something. But instead, she took a deep breath and hit block. Neither of them deserved her time anymore. Emma wasn't stupid. She knew Ryan wouldn't take this lying down. He'd fight. And Sophie, well, she'd try to smooth things over, spin it like it wasn't a big deal. But Emma was done being the pushover. The next day, Ryan showed up at Sophie's apartment. "Let me in." "Ryan, now." Sophie stepped aside, letting him in, but her expression was tight. "What do you mean she knows? Did you tell her?" Ryan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small living room. "No, I didn't tell her. She found out, went through my phone or something." "Oh my God," Sophie whispered, sinking onto the couch. "What do we do?" "I don't know," Ryan snapped. "She took everything. The accounts are drained. My cards are frozen. She even took my laptop." "Wait, what?" Sophie's eyes widened. "How?" "She must have planned this. I don't know how, but she did. And now I'm screwed unless we figure out how to fix this." Sophie bit her lip. "Maybe we can talk to her." Ryan laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Talk? Are you serious? She's not coming back, Sophie. Not after what we did." "Then what?" Sophie stood, her voice rising. "We just let her ruin us. My business depends on my reputation, Ryan. I can't afford a scandal. And I can't afford to lose everything in the divorce." They both froze, the reality of the situation sinking in. Emma had the upper hand, and they both knew it. "We need a plan," Sophie said finally. "Something to stop her before she takes this public." Emma wasn't wasting any time. By the end of the week, She'd hired a lawyer, secured a new apartment, and started untangling herself from Ryan's life. But the more she distanced herself, the angrier she got. Not just at Ryan, but at herself. She'd ignored the signs for so long, excused the late nights and the lies. Why? Because she wanted to believe in their marriage. In him. Not anymore. Her lawyer, Julie, was sharp and didn't sugarcoat things. "He's going to fight you on this," Julie said during their first meeting. "Especially with the finances. But we've got leverage, proof of the affair, access to the accounts. You're in a good position." Emma nodded, but the pit in her stomach didn't go away. "Just remember," Julie added, "this isn't about revenge. It's about protecting yourself, and if he tries to retaliate, we'll be ready." And retaliate, he did. 2 days later, Emma came home to find a legal notice taped to her door. Ryan was filing for an emergency hearing, claiming she'd stolen marital assets and abandoned the household. "You've got to be kidding me," Emma muttered, crumpling the paper in her fist. She called Julie immediately. "Relax," Julie said. "He's bluffing. Judges see this all the time. Just stick to the facts and let me handle the rest." But Emma wasn't in the mood to relax. She was done playing defense. Sophie was unraveling. The rumors had started. Small whispers about her personal life, about Ryan, nothing concrete, but enough to make her clients hesitate. She'd already lost 2 major contracts, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the rest followed. "Ryan, you need to fix this," she hissed over the phone. "I'm trying. Try harder, because if I go down, you're going down with me." The courtroom was cold, sterile, exactly what Emma expected. She sat next to Julie, her hands folded neatly in her lap, while Ryan glared at her from across the aisle. He looked rough, tired and worn, but Emma didn't feel sorry for him. The judge called the hearing to order, and the arguments began. Ryan's lawyer painted Emma as irrational and impulsive, accusing her of draining the accounts out of spite. Julie countered with receipts, literal receipts, showing how Ryan had spent thousands on secret dinners, hotels, and gifts. She handed over the messages Emma had found, laying out the affair in black and white. By the end of the hearing, it was clear who the judge believed. Emma walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than she had in months. It wasn't over, not yet, but it was a start. She paused outside, taking a deep breath. The sun was shining, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. Her phone buzzed, a notification from her lawyer. "Judge granted full access to joint accounts, temporary restraining order approved." Emma smiled. Let Ryan and Sophie scramble. This was only the beginning. And there you have it, our story so far. What would you do if you were in Emma's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Ryan sat in his dimly lit apartment, the walls closing in as his thoughts spiraled. Bills were piling up, the business was tanking, and Sophie had stopped answering his calls. The woman who had once clung to him like a lifeline was suddenly nowhere to be found. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the empty whiskey glass. This wasn't how things were supposed to end. He was supposed to win. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. A text from Sophie finally lit up the screen. "We need to talk, urgent." Sophie sat at the corner table of a dimly lit bar, her manicured nails tapping nervously against the glass. When Ryan walked in, she barely recognized him. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and his shoulders slumped in defeat. "God, you look like hell," she said. "Thanks," he muttered, sliding into the seat across from her. "What's so urgent?" Sophie leaned in, her voice low. "Emma's playing dirtier than we thought. She's got people digging into my finances. My accounts are frozen. Ryan, they're building a case against me for fraud." Ryan's eyes widened. "Fraud? What the hell are you talking about?" "Those contracts, the ones we faked. She knows, Ryan. She has proof." Ryan leaned back, rubbing his temples. This was bad, worse than bad. "So what do we do?" he asked. Sophie's voice dropped even lower. "We make her stop whatever it takes." Emma's lawyer, Julie, wasn't surprised when Emma called in a panic the next day. "They're threatening me," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Sophie sent me a message. Something about knowing where I live and that I should back off." Julie's tone turned sharp. "We'll report it to the police. Don't worry, Emma. This is what people like them do when they're cornered. They lash out." But Emma wasn't convinced she'd seen the desperation in Ryan's eyes, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. And Sophie, she'd always had a mean streak. That night, Emma double-checked the locks on her doors and windows. She even set up a security camera by the front entrance, just in case. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened next. The sound of shattering glass jolted Emma awake. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her phone and crept toward the living room. The sight made her stomach drop. A brick lay in the middle of the floor, surrounded by shards of broken glass. Attached to it was a note. "Stop or else." Emma's hands shook as she dialed 911. Ryan wasn't home when the police showed up at his apartment the next morning, but Sophie was. They led her out in handcuffs, her protests echoing down the hallway. "This is ridiculous, I had nothing to do with it." But Emma's security footage told a different story. Sophie's car had been parked outside Emma's building for nearly an hour, before the brick came flying through the window. And when they searched Sophie's apartment, they found the gloves she'd worn, still covered in glass dust. Ryan was spiraling. With Sophie behind bars, and his account still frozen, he had nowhere to turn. He called Emma again and again, leaving voicemail after voicemail. "Emma, please, let's talk about this. We don't have to go to court, we can figure this out." But Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her lawyer filed for a restraining order the next day, and it was approved within hours. Ryan was officially out of options. Weeks passed, and Emma finally started to feel like she could breathe again. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, the restraining order was holding, and Sophie was facing criminal charges. But Ryan wasn't finished yet. He showed up at Emma's work, waiting in the parking lot like a shadow. She spotted him as soon as she stepped outside, her pulse quickening. "Emma," he called, stepping toward her. She froze. "You're not supposed to be here. I just want to talk. You're violating the restraining order. Please, Emma, just give me 5 minutes." "No," she said firmly, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." But before she could dial, Ryan lunged, grabbing her wrist. "Don't do this," he hissed. Emma struggled, but before things could escalate, 2 of her co-workers appeared. "Hey!" one of them shouted. "Let her go." Ryan released her, stepping back with his hands raised. "This isn't over," he said before turning and walking away. But for Emma, it was over. She filed assault charges the next day, adding to the legal storm already brewing around Ryan. Sophie took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Ryan in exchange for a reduced sentence, and with her cooperation, more secrets came to light. Hidden bank accounts, forged contracts, and evidence that Ryan had been embezzling from his own company for months. It wasn't long before Ryan was facing charges of his own: fraud, assault, and harassment. Emma stood in the courthouse, watching as Ryan was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look at her, not once. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined for their marriage, but it was the one she needed. And that's where we'll pause for now. What do you think? Did Emma go too far, or did she do what she had to do? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, the kind of suffocating tension that made even the most seasoned attorneys shift in their seats. Emma sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked calm, too calm, but inside, her nerves were on fire. Ryan sat across the room, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. He looked different now, thinner, hollowed out. His expensive suits couldn't hide the cracks forming under the pressure. Emma's lawyer leaned toward her. "Stay focused. We've got this." She nodded, but her heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about justice. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The first hour dragged on with legal jargon and procedural arguments, but things shifted when Julie called Sophie to the stand. Sophie shuffled in, her wrists still bearing the faint marks of handcuffs. She wouldn't make eye contact with Ryan as she took her seat. Julie wasted no time. "Miss Bennett, can you explain your relationship with the defendant?" Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. "We were involved." "Involved how?" She swallowed hard. "We had an affair." Ryan flinched, but Emma didn't move. "And during this affair, did you and Mr. Harris conspire against my client?" "Yes," Sophie admitted, her voice cracking. We planned to hide money to make it look like Emma was unstable. Gasps rippled through the room. Ryan's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. Overruled. Julie pressed on. Did you vandalize my client's property? Sophie's hands twisted in her lap. Yes. And who asked you to do it? Sophie hesitated. Ryan. Ryan jumped up. She's lying. The judge pounded his gavel. Mr. Harris, sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt. After Sophie's testimony, everything unraveled. The evidence piled up. Bank records, text messages, even surveillance footage of Ryan outside Emma's apartment after the restraining order had been issued. Ryan's lawyer fought hard, but it was like trying to stop a flood with duct tape. When Emma finally took the stand, she faced Ryan head-on. Mrs. Harris, why did you leave your husband? Julie asked. Emma's voice was steady. Because he betrayed me, not just with Sophie, but with lies, manipulation, and threats I left to protect myself. And what do you want now? Emma looked directly at Ryan. I want my life back, and I want him to be held accountable for what he's done. Ryan's face hardened, but Emma didn't flinch. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. The judge ruled in Emma's favor: full ownership of the marital assets, a permanent restraining order, and hefty legal fees for Ryan to pay. But that wasn't the end. The judge also referred Ryan's case to the district attorney for criminal charges: fraud, harassment, and attempted assault. Ryan's world crumbled in real time. He slumped in his chair, his face pale as his lawyer whispered the bad news. Outside the courthouse, Emma finally let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. It's over, Julie said, patting her shoulder. Emma smiled faintly. Not yet, but it will be. She turned her phone back on and scrolled through the notifications. Dozens of missed calls and texts from Ryan. Pleas, threats, apologies. She deleted them all. Ryan wasn't ready to give up. 2 days later, he showed up at Emma's apartment. Despite the restraining order, he pounded on the door, shouting her name. Emma called the police, but by the time they arrived, Ryan was gone. That's when she knew. He wasn't just desperate. He was dangerous. Later that night, Emma sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through security camera footage. She paused, her stomach dropping. Ryan's car was parked across the street. Her phone rang. It was Julie. Emma, I just got word. Ryan's out on bail. Emma's blood ran cold. And there you have it. The tension's boiling over, and the stakes are higher than ever. What do you think Emma should do next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Emma's hands trembled as she double-checked the locks on her front door. The security camera feed was pulled up on her laptop, and there it was again, Ryan's car. Same spot, same time. She paced the living room, her phone in one hand, and a kitchen knife in the other. She wasn't taking any chances. Not anymore. A knock at the door froze her in place. Emma? It was Julie's voice. Emma let out a shaky breath and opened the door. You scared the hell out of me. Julie stepped inside, glancing at the knife. And clearly I'm not the only one who's scared. Emma set the knife down and sank into the couch. He's out there, Julie, watching me. Julie's face hardened. I'll call the police again. He's already violating the restraining order. They'll just tell me to wait until something happens, Emma snapped. And by then, it could be too late. Julie knelt in front of her, grabbing her hands. Listen to me. He's desperate, and that makes him sloppy, but it also makes him dangerous. We'll handle this, but you can't let him see you scared. Emma nodded, but the fear in her chest didn't go away. Across town, Ryan sat in his car, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. He'd lost everything, his marriage, his money, and now his freedom was hanging by a thread. But Emma. She was still standing, still smiling in those news interviews, pretending to be the victim. Not for long. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he'd been avoiding for weeks. Sophie, he said when she answered. Ryan, are you insane? Do you know what's happening to me because of you? I need your help. Sophie laughed bitterly. Help, you mean like the way you helped me land in jail? No thanks. You don't get it, Ryan said, his voice dropping. Emma's trying to ruin us both. She's not going to stop. Good, Sophie spat. Maybe you'll finally know what it feels like to lose. The line went dead. Ryan threw his phone at the dashboard, cursing. Emma barely slept that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound out of place. But it wasn't until 3 a.m. that the real nightmare began. A loud crash sent Emma bolting upright. She grabbed her phone and the knife from earlier, creeping toward the living room. The front window was shattered, glass scattered across the floor. And then she saw him. Ryan stood in the doorway, his eyes wild. "Emma, we need to talk." Her hands shook as she raised the knife. "Get out." "I just want to explain." "Get out." Ryan stepped closer. "You don't understand. You're ruining my life, Emma." "And you ruined mine," she snapped, her voice steady this time. "Now get out before I call the police." Ryan lunged, and Emma didn't hesitate. She slashed out with the knife, catching his arm. He stumbled back, cursing. In that moment, Emma bolted for the door, flinging it open and screaming into the night. A neighbor's porch light came on, and Ryan froze. He looked at Emma, then at the growing number of lights turning on around them. He ran. The police arrived within minutes, but Ryan was already gone. They took statements, dusted for prints, and promised to increase patrols in the area. But Emma didn't feel safe. Not yet. Julie stayed with her that night, and by morning, the police had a lead. Ryan's car had been found abandoned outside a nearby motel, and security footage showed him leaving on foot. "They'll catch him," Julie said, handing Emma a cup of coffee. "It's just a matter of time." Emma stared out the window. "I'm not waiting. I'm ending this." While the police searched for Ryan, Emma got to work. She hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Ryan's finances, and what they found made her blood run cold. He'd drained not just their joint accounts, but also several others she didn't even know existed. Hidden accounts tied to Sophie's business. "Looks like he's trying to disappear," the investigator said. "Maybe leave the country." Emma's jaw tightened. "Not if I stop him first." That night, Ryan broke into Emma's house again, but this time, she was ready. She hid in the shadows, her phone recording everything. "Emma," Ryan called out, his voice echoing through the dark. "I know you're here." She stayed silent, waiting as he moved closer. "You can't hide from me," he said, stepping into the living room. That's when Emma hit the button on her phone, and the house filled with the sound of sirens. Ryan spun, panic flashing across his face. But before he could run, the red and blue lights outside lit up the room. The police burst through the door, guns drawn. Ryan dropped to his knees, his hands raised. Watching them haul him away should have felt like victory. But as Emma stood there, surrounded by broken glass and flashing lights, all she felt was exhausted. Julie appeared beside her. "It's over." Emma let out a shaky breath. "Not yet." Because even as Ryan disappeared into the back of the squad car, Emma knew there was still one last fight ahead. And that's where we'll pause for now. What would you have done if you were in Emma's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. The sun was just beginning to rise as Emma stood in her living room, staring at the shattered glass that littered the floor. The police had taken Ryan away hours ago, but the echoes of his voice still lingered. "You can't hide from me." Those words haunted her. Even with Ryan in custody, Emma knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Julie arrived later that morning, holding 2 coffees and wearing the kind of expression that told Emma she wasn't bringing good news. "He made bail," Julie said without preamble, setting the coffee down on the table. Emma froze. "What?" "I just got the call. He posted bail an hour ago." Emma's chest tightened. How does he still have access to money?" Julie sighed. "He didn't use his own accounts. It looks like someone else helped him, probably Sophie." Emma's fists clenched. Sophie might have cut ties with Ryan publicly, but clearly, she wasn't finished playing games. "What do we do now?" Emma asked. Julie set her coffee down and leaned in. "We don't back down, we push harder. The police have enough evidence to charge him, but we need to make sure he doesn't have any more tricks up his sleeve." Emma nodded, but the fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. Meanwhile, Ryan was unraveling. He sat in a dingy motel room, the blinds drawn, and the air stale. His hands shook as he scrolled through the headlines on his phone. "Local businessman faces assault and fraud charges." Restraining order violated. Emma Harris speaks out. The comments were worse. People called him a monster, a coward, a manipulator. Even his old friends had turned against him. His phone buzzed. Another text from Sophie. "This is the last time I'm helping you. Don't contact me again." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he muttered to himself. "Not a chance." Emma spent the next few days preparing for the worst. She installed more cameras, changed her locks, and even kept a baseball bat by her bed. But nothing could prepare her for what came next. It was just after midnight when her phone buzzed. A notification from one of the security cameras. Motion detected. Front door. Emma's stomach dropped. She grabbed the bat and pulled up the live feed. It wasn't Ryan. It was Sophie. She stood there, swaying slightly, her eyes darting nervously toward the camera. Then, she held up a phone and waved it. Emma hesitated, then opened the door. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sophie shoved past her, locking the door behind her. "I need your help." Emma laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You need my help?" "Yes," Sophie hissed, pacing the room. "Ryan's losing it. He's out of control." Emma crossed her arms. "You think I care after everything you did?" Sophie spun around, her eyes wide with panic. "He's coming for you, Emma. And if you don't stop him, he's going to hurt you. Or worse." Emma's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, worse?" Sophie pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. "Look at this," she said, shoving the screen into Emma's hands. The messages were from Ryan. "I'm not going down alone. If she wants a war, I'll give her one. Tell Emma to watch her back." Emma's heart pounded as she scrolled through the threats. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I'm scared too," Sophie snapped. "I thought he loved me, Emma. But now I see what he really is, and I can't fix it. But maybe you can." Emma shook her head. "No, I'm done cleaning up his messes. Please." Sophie's voice broke. "He's dangerous, Emma, and he's not going to stop." The next day, Emma met with Julie and the private investigator. "He's hiding something," the investigator said, spreading out documents on the table. "These accounts? They're not just for savings. He's been funneling money into offshore accounts for months." Emma leaned in. "So he was planning to run?" "Exactly," Julie said. "And now that we've cut off most of his resources, he's getting desperate." "Which makes him unpredictable," the investigator added. Emma's stomach churned. She thought she'd seen the worst of Ryan, but now she wasn't so sure. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Sophie's words in her head. "He's not going to stop." Her phone buzzed again. Another security alert. "Motion detected. Backyard." Emma's breath caught as she pulled up the camera feed. It was Ryan. He was standing by the back fence, staring at the house. Her hand trembled as she called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. The next morning, Emma woke up to find her car vandalized, tires slashed, windows shattered. Julie arrived within minutes. "That's it," she said. "We're filing new charges today." But Emma wasn't listening. She was staring at the note left on the windshield. "You can't run forever." And that's where we'll leave it for now. What do you think Emma should do next? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on this story. Emma stood frozen, staring at the shredded tires and shattered glass that surrounded her car. The morning sun reflected off the jagged edges, casting sharp glints across the pavement. But it wasn't the damage that made her stomach twist. It was the note taped to the windshield. "You can't run forever." Her fingers trembled as she tore the paper free, crumpling it into a ball. She knew exactly who had left it. Ryan wasn't done with her, and this was his way of letting her know. Julie was already on the phone, pacing back and forth as she spoke to the police. Emma barely heard the words. Her heartbeat drowned out everything else. "This has to stop," Emma whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Julie ended the call and turned to her. "They're sending a patrol car to watch the house tonight, and I've pushed the DA's office to expedite the new charges." Emma nodded, but the pit in her stomach didn't go away. The police had been involved before. It didn't stop Ryan then, and she doubted it would stop him now. Across town, Ryan paced the length of his motel room, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He had pushed too hard. He knew that the police were breathing down his neck, and Sophie had turned against him. But Emma. She still had everything. Her freedom, her reputation, her future. He wasn't about to let her win. Grabbing his phone, he scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Private investigator, Leo Fisher. The call connected, and a gravelly voice answered. Fisher. I need someone followed, Ryan said, his voice low. And I need it done fast. Back at the house, Emma couldn't sit still. She double-checked the locks, tested the security cameras, and rehearsed the emergency plan Julie had helped her create. But no matter how many times she went over the steps, the fear lingered. Ryan was unraveling. She had seen it in his eyes, and now he was desperate. Sophie's warnings echoed in her head. He's not going to stop. The knock at the door made her jump. It's me, Julie called out. Emma let her in, her shoulders sagging with relief. I brought something, Julie said, holding up a small black box. Emma blinked. What is it? A panic button. Julie set it down on the counter and opened it, revealing a sleek device with a red button in the center. Press this, and it immediately alerts the police. No dialing, no waiting. They'll trace the signal and send help. Emma exhaled. Thank you. Julie squeezed her hand. We're almost there. He's desperate now, which means he's sloppy. That's how we'll catch him. Emma wanted to believe her, but the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. The next night, Emma sat in her living room, staring at the security feed on her phone. The police patrol car was parked across the street, but even that didn't ease her nerves. Her phone buzzed, a text from Julie. Call me if you need anything. Emma set the phone down and stood, stretching her legs. That's when she heard it. A faint creak. She froze, listening. Another creak, this time from the back door. Her breath caught. Emma grabbed the panic button and edged toward the kitchen, her heart pounding in her ears. The door handle rattled. Press it, she told herself. But her fingers hesitated. What if it was nothing? What if it was just her paranoia? Then came the unmistakable sound of the lock clicking open. She pressed the button. The red light blinked. The alarm sounded, a shrill noise that filled the house. Footsteps pounded outside. A shadow darted past the window, and then it was gone. Emma's knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, just as the police burst through the front door. Ryan didn't get far. The officers caught him 2 blocks away, his hands bleeding from the broken glass he'd climbed through to get to the back door. Emma stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching as they shoved him into the back of the squad car. He glared at her through the window, his face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, Emma, he shouted. But Emma didn't flinch. She'd heard it all before. Julie appeared beside her. It's over. Emma turned to her. No, not yet. 2 days later, Emma sat in the DA's office, going over the final paperwork. Ryan was facing multiple charges now. Breaking and entering, harassment, and violating the restraining order. And this time, there was no bail. But as Emma signed the last form, she felt a weight settle on her chest. It wasn't relief. It was something else. Are you okay? Julie asked. Emma hesitated, then nodded. I will be. Because even though Ryan was behind bars, the damage he had done lingered, and Emma knew it would take time, maybe years, to rebuild the trust and security he had stolen from her. But she wasn't broken, not anymore, and that's where we'll leave it for now. What do you think about Ryan's downfall? Was justice served, or is there more to this story? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this one. The courthouse buzzed with tension. Emma stood just outside the courtroom, her hands clenched into fists, to keep them from trembling. She had faced Ryan before, but this time felt different. This wasn't about restraining orders or vandalized property anymore. This was about putting him away for good. Julie stood beside her, flipping through files, her confidence as unshakable as ever. Are you ready for this? Emma nodded, though her heart hammered in her chest. I have to be. Inside, Ryan sat at the defense table, dressed in a cheap suit that did little to hide how much he'd deteriorated. The once slick businessman now looked gaunt, his face pale and hollow. But his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, still held the same malice. He didn't even try to look remorseful. The prosecutor opened with a timeline of events, laying out every charge in grim detail. The break-ins, the threats, the harassment. And then there was the surveillance footage, the smoking gun, The courtroom was silent as the video played. It showed Ryan creeping around Emma's backyard, testing the doors, and finally breaking the lock. The image froze on his face as the alarm went off, capturing the moment he realized he'd been caught. The jury shifted in their seats, unease rippling through the room. Ryan's lawyer tried to spin it. He painted Ryan as a man pushed to the edge, a victim of heartbreak and desperation, but the evidence spoke louder than words. Then it was Emma's turn to testify. She took the stand, locking eyes with Ryan for the briefest moment before looking away. "Mrs. Harris," the prosecutor began, "can you describe the night of the break-in?" Emma recounted everything, how she'd been alone, how the sound of breaking glass jolted her awake, how she'd pressed the panic button just in time. "And how did you feel in that moment?" Emma hesitated, her voice tight. "Terrified I thought he was going to hurt me, or worse." Ryan's lawyer stood. "Objection. Speculation." "Overruled," the judge said. The questions continued, and Emma held her ground. She refused to cry, refused to let Ryan see even a flicker of weakness. When she stepped down from the stand, Julie gave her a reassuring nod. "You nailed it." But Ryan wasn't finished yet. When he took the stand, he played his last card: manipulation. "I never wanted to hurt Emma," he said, his voice trembling. "I just wanted to talk to her to fix things." He looked at the jury, his eyes glassy with what might have passed as tears. "I made mistakes, I let my anger get the best of me, but I'm not a monster." Emma clenched her fists. She'd seen this act before, the charm, the guilt, the carefully measured words, but this time, no one was buying it. The prosecutor tore into him, bringing up the threats, the financial fraud, and Sophie's testimony. Ryan's mask started to crack. "Why did you send threatening messages?" "I didn't mean them." "And the brick through the window?" "That wasn't me." "And the break-in?" Ryan faltered. "I just wanted to talk." "By breaking into her home?" He didn't have an answer. The closing arguments came fast, and then the jury was dismissed to deliberate. Emma barely heard a word. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and the waiting felt unbearable. Julie sat beside her, calm as always. "We've got this." But Emma couldn't shake the fear that somehow Ryan would slip through the cracks. The verdict came back in less than 4 hours. Guilty on all charges. The words hit Emma like a tidal wave. Relief, fear, exhaustion. They all crashed over her at once. She barely noticed as Ryan was led away in handcuffs, shouting about how she'd ruined his life. Julie hugged her. "It's over." But Emma shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." A week later, Emma sat in her lawyer's office, going over the final paperwork Ryan was facing, years behind bars. But Emma wasn't celebrating yet. "He's going to appeal," Julie warned. "It's what men like him do, but we'll be ready." Emma nodded. She was done being afraid. That night, Emma stood in her empty living room. The locks had been changed, the windows repaired, but the scars were still there, both in the house and in her heart. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "I'm sorry." Emma stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting the message. Sorry wasn't enough. Not anymore. And that's where we'll pause for now. What do you think? Did Ryan get what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on this story. 6 months had passed since Ryan was found guilty, and Emma finally felt like she could breathe again. The nightmares had stopped, or at least they came less often now, and the constant fear that he would show up at her door had faded. But the scars were still there. Emma stood in her kitchen, brewing coffee as the morning sunlight spilled through the windows. She glanced at the security camera feed on her phone, a habit she hadn't been able to break. The screens showed empty streets and quiet sidewalks. Safe. Julie had called earlier that morning with an update. Ryan's appeal had been denied. He wasn't going anywhere, not for a long time. Emma should have felt triumphant, but mostly she felt tired. Winning didn't feel as satisfying as she thought it would. Instead, it felt like survival. Later that day, Emma met Julie for lunch. "You look good," Julie said, setting her purse down. "Less stressed." "Thanks," Emma replied, stirring her iced tea. "I'm starting to feel normal again." Julie smiled. "And Sophie?" Emma's expression hardened. Still dodging my calls. Sophie had avoided testifying in Ryan's appeal, but Emma wasn't ready to let her off the hook. She wasn't angry anymore. At least, not in the same way. Mostly, she just felt pity. "She's scared," Julie said. "People like Sophie always are." Emma nodded. She understood fear better than most. Back at home, Emma sorted through boxes, packing up what little remained of her old life. The house still felt tainted, even after the repairs and new locks. She pulled out an old photo album, flipping through pictures of her and Ryan from when they were happy. Or at least, when she thought they were. Her fingers paused over one picture. Their wedding day, Ryan looked confident, charming, the way he always did in public. But now, Emma could see it. The cracks, the control, the way his arm rested just a little too tightly around her waist. She shut the album and shoved it into the donation pile. The following week, Emma signed the final papers, selling the house. It was time for a fresh start, a new home where she could build something better. She stood in the empty living room one last time, letting the silence settle. "Goodbye," she whispered, closing the door behind her. Months later, Emma sat on the patio of her new home, sipping coffee as she watched the sun rise. It wasn't a big house, just a cozy 2-bedroom with a small garden. But it felt safe, peaceful. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julie. "Final hearing scheduled for next week. We'll close this chapter for good." Emma smiled. She was ready. And what about Ryan? Well, his prison sentence didn't end the way he thought it would. Once the fraud charges were finalized, the IRS stepped in, adding even more legal trouble to his plate. The man who once had it all was now facing years behind bars with no chance of early release. Sophie. She managed to avoid prison by cutting a deal, but her career was over. She tried to rebrand herself, but the scandal followed her wherever she went. As for Emma, she didn't need revenge to feel whole. Moving forward was enough. One afternoon, Emma found herself back at the courthouse, not for Ryan, but to volunteer at a support group for women escaping abusive relationships. She didn't plan on speaking at first, but when she saw how nervous the others looked, something inside her shifted. She stood up, clearing her throat. "I used to think being strong meant keeping quiet," she said, her voice steady. "But I've learned that real strength is speaking up, even when it's scary." The group listened, and for the first time, Emma felt like her story wasn't just about pain. It was about survival. And that's the end of Emma's story, or at least this chapter of it. What would you have done in her shoes? Do you think she handled things the right way, or should she have taken a different path? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.